And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Evan R. Liblit Memorial Scholarship Committee's fourth Waste on Wednesday seminar. My name is Mike Cahill, and I'm pleased to serve as your moderator today. But first, I'd like to take a minute to talk to you a little bit about the Liblit Scholarship Committee at Stony Brook and what we do. I'm the chair of the committee, and I also have had the pleasure of knowing Evan Liblit in his altogether too brief sojourn with us here. Evan was a highly respected colleague who passed away at age 47 in 1995. In his short life, he worked a very productive life. He worked for the EPA, the DEC, the town of Babylon, and in private sector recycling. He found time to teach at Stony Brook. In the mid-70s, while working for EPA in Manhattan, he organized a paper recycling program for the federal buildings there. The EPA loaned him to the DEC in the late 70s, and he went to, in 1987, he went to Albany to craft the state's first solid waste management plan and first recycling plan. He also helped what grew to form the Association of Long Island Recycling Officials. And I remember being with Evan as he organized municipal recycling officials and municipal solid waste officials into a very productive organization, and was really the first time that the towns on Long Island were able to cooperate with each other. And we all owe a lot to Evan just for that. After his passing in 1995, a lot of his colleagues formed a scholarship committee, a scholarship fund at Stony Brook to continue his legacy. And over the last 22 years, we've provided scholarships to 21 graduate students and 16 undergraduates, and many have gone on to become leaders in their fields. Our funds are raised usually at an annual breakfast held each year around America Recycles Day in November. But of course, this year, we're not going to be able to do that. Ironically, though, with the event of Zoom, the committee has been able to get online and present the symposium, which had been originally scheduled for back March 19. These Zoom sessions have been organized to try to bring some interest and and information to the solid waste community and the environmental community around Long Island and across the state. We have planned 6 of them. This is our 4th. We have 2 more to go, one in 2 weeks and another 2 weeks after that. We'll be focusing on transportation and then waste to energy. I'm going to introduce our speakers now. We're going to mute everybody that's on the conference call except for the speakers. And if you have any questions, please enter them into the chat box on your screen, and I will try to group them together and ask them and get them to the speakers at the end of their presentations. Today our subject is organics, and we have 2 very well-informed and knowledgeable speakers with a great deal of experience between the 2 of them. Our first presenter will be Mr. Charles Vigliotti. Charles is the president and the CEO of American Organic Energy, and also of the Long Island Compost Corporation. He's an alumnus of Chaminade High School here on Long Island, and a graduate of St. John's University and Boston College Law School. Together with his brother Arnold, Charles founded Vigliotti Brothers Carting Corporation in 1976, and running the business for nearly 2 decades before forming the Long Island Compost Corporation. In the years since, that company has risen in the ranks to its current role, serving as one of the premier manufacturers and distributors of engineered soils in the nation. In 2016, Long Island Compost entered into a joint venture with Scott's Miracle-Gro, leading to the distribution of its products at garden centers throughout the Northeast, and as well as high-profile retail centers such as Home Depot. With 40 years in the carting and organic waste industry, Charlie has been recognized as an industry leader and an environmental champion. He has been profiled on the cover of the New York Times Magazine, and he has through Long Island Compost, engineered bulk soil and mulch products for landmark regional regional products, such as the National World Trade Center Memorial, City Field, and numerous rooftops throughout New York City. Charlie, for the last several years, has been formulating and moving ahead with the permitting and construction of a very sophisticated anaerobic digester facility on its property in Yaphank. That is the subject of this particular talk. Charlie is going to tell us, I hope, about what that facility can do, and we believe it's estimated on the blueprint to convert 180,000 tons of organic waste into renewable energy and fertilizer, while reducing 40,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions in this region. Charlie has received a number of accolades from the governor and from Long Island Press, and he lives in Oyster Bay, and with his wife Marjorie. They have 2 grown daughters and recently welcomed their first grandchild, which is always a good thing for a grandfather like me to compliment somebody on. So I will now turn it over to Mr. Charles Vigliotti, and if you could take it from here, Charlie. Thank you. Charlie.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael, and thank you to the Evan R. Liblit Memorial Scholarship Committee. It's an honor to address this group today, and I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing, what we've done, and how we're positioned to go forward in something that is very exciting to us and is something that's been in the works for nearly a decade now. But it's important, I think, to see how we got to where we are today. As Michael said, my brothers and I formed Vigliotti Brothers Karting in 1976. And like a lot of the people on this, a lot of the entrepreneurs in the karting industry participating today, we started small. We had 1 truck. We picked up the trash at commercial establishments in Jackson Heights, Queens, and in the middle of the night. We have real hands-on experience in moving waste. We understand how waste is generated. We understand how it moves. We understand what those kitchens look like. We like to say that we have a tremendous amount of backdoor experience in restaurants. We know what those containers look like. And that informs everything that we've done and are doing. As Mike also said, 30 years ago, we formed Long Island Compost, and the basic business model of Long Island Compost was to procure organic material with a focus on yard waste, process this organic material, and market the organic products that are the result of this. And like most operations, it started small, and we've built it to the point where we have a major operation today. Certainly the largest composter and recycler of organics in the New York metropolitan region. And this has positioned us to be able to take our next step, which was the formation of American Organic Energy. American Organic Energy is planned to be nothing less than the most sophisticated food waste processing facility in the country. We are permitted to accept 180,000 tons of organic waste, food waste, 30,000 tons of fog, fats, oils, and greases. And this facility will be a fundamental change in how the region looks upon and handles food waste. Currently, we have a process that picks up the waste from restaurants, hospitals, schools, catering facilities, etc., hauls it to a transfer station, drops it on the floor where it's repackaged, baled. Those bales are loaded onto flatbed tractor trailers, and they exit Long Island, going through New York City, destined for landfills hundreds of miles away, in Ohio, Virginia, multiple locations, none of them close. This process is inefficient, it's very costly, and it's dirty. It's dirty from a lot of points of view, not the least of which is its carbon footprint, its contribution to greenhouse gases, and it's just not the way a 21st century society should process, if it can. And we can. Tomorrow's process, what American Organic Energy is looking to bring to this, is efficient, cost-effective, clean, and manageable. And very, very important for Long Islanders. What it does is it takes a substantial amount of the waste that's produced today and currently exported and retains it locally. It makes us more independent as a region. We, instead of contributing to this dirty, expensive way of handling waste, we're going to be very efficient. We're going to be cost effective, and that's very, very important to a lot of the people who are watching and listening today. It will be less expensive than how we're handling waste today. It will be clean, and it will be manageable. And clean, instead of contributing to greenhouse gases, will actually have a net positive with regards greenhouse gases. Our carbon footprint will be reduced substantially. Rather than all of this organic waste being baled and shipped out of state, we're going to keep it here, and we're going to repurpose it. It's going to come into a 21st century, very sophisticated facility. Trucks will pull up. A door will open up. When the door opens up, the entire building is under negative air. So rather than dirty air escaping the building into the surrounding community, clean air from outside will actually be pulled in. The door will close, the truck will back up, an interior door will open, and that truck will offload its material into a recessed pit. They'll pull up, clean off the tailgate, an interior door will come down, they'll pull up to the exterior door, it will open up, they will hit the scale, and they will be back on their way to pick up more waste. But the important thing is what we're going to do with it once it hits that tipping floor. First, we're going to take it and we're going to clean it. And when we say clean it, we're going to remove the residual material that inevitably comes from out of a kitchen. Meaning, food waste. Under the best of circumstances, the food that will be diverted here and will be diverted under New York State law mandating this, there will be other things besides everything that you see in this picture. There are going to be, first of all, plastic bags. There are going to be cans. There are going to be cutlery. There's going to be, the occasional broken plate. It's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. So what we've done is we've instituted, or we will be putting in, some very sophisticated, fully automatic separation equipment, which will purge the bags open, which will separate out the digestibles from the non-digestibles. Out of the non-digestibles, we will recycle what we are able to recycle. So, for example, that dented can that the supermarket throws out because it's no longer marketable. This is my visual aid. I carry this around. This is a dented tuna can. Now, nobody in a supermarket is going to go buy this and bring this home. And it's a little difficult to recycle as is. We're going to take this tuna can in. We're going to bring it into the facility. We're going to purge the tuna out of it, and we're going to recycle the can. And we're going to do it all automatically. But the important thing is what we do with this food waste. We will make a slurry out of this food waste, pump it into tanks where it will decompose in the tanks. And in the tanks, it will give off methane gas. The same methane gas that it will give off in a landfill. But rather than polluting the air or polluting the groundwater or polluting surface water, we're going to capture that methane. We're going to take it, we're going to pipe it, and we're going to repurpose it. And we're going to do a couple of things with it. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to use the gas to power the plant itself. We're going to create the electricity that powers the plant, that runs the machinery, that keeps the lights on, that keeps our entire operation going. And the rest of the gas, we're going to convert into vehicle fuel. We're going to put it into the pipeline, and we're going to be creating a tremendous amount of clean, renewable energy on an ongoing basis. It's an exciting project. And with the digestate that comes in afterwards, after all the gas is taken out and all the material decomposes, there's a lot of water, and there are a lot of solids in that water. And we're going to screen the solids out. We're going to compost the solids, and we're going to bring it back into the Long Island Compost Marketing Program. The water, we're going to clean, and we're going to be bringing that back and repurposing that also. But none of this is possible without a broader view of stakeholders. Historically, moving waste, one thought of the stakeholders as the customer, the carter, the landfill. Well, there's a lot more people involved in this. And we're very happy that we were able to come together, and these various different groups have come together to support this program. And I'd like to highlight where this comes from first. And all credit really has to go to the environmental advocates first. They're the ones who decades ago were raising the concern that the way we handle waste is not environmentally sound. And they've spurred the business community and governments and regulators to begin to address this. American Organic Energy, as Mike alluded to, has enjoyed a tremendous amount of support from our various municipalities. First, from our host community in Brookhaven. And Brookhaven is to be commended for seeing this. The DEC, who've supported the project and have created a framework within which we've designed this. The engineering community, who have been able to bring the best scientific minds in the world to this. Waste management companies. A lot of the folks who are on this call today, who are involved in the day-to-day service of those businesses and homes, and without whom nothing works over here. And we enjoy some terrific relations with all of them. But clearly, very important for a project such as this, it would be impossible without the support of the surrounding communities. My brother and I had multiple meetings with the local residential groups, and they were terrific. They expressed serious concerns about this and about the rest of our operation, very honestly. We sat down with them, we addressed it, we came to an agreement on how best to mitigate the impacts of a major solid waste facility in their neighborhood. And any of the people on this call who have been involved in the waste business understand that it's always a challenge to get a local community to accept something like this. And I have to tell you, the people of Yaphank have been absolutely fabulous. They've been great about it. So, in a nutshell, that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking this, we're going to be creating clean, renewable energy, we're going to be creating fertilizer, we're going to be creating first-class compost out of it. And very important on what it's not going to do. It's not going to choke up our highways. It's not going to fill up distant landfills, and it's not going to contribute to greenhouse gases. We're going to take 180,000 tons of food waste a year. It's going to come into the facility. Out of it, we're going to pull out the plastic, the metal, the paper, anything that works its way down. The food waste is going to go into these giant tanks, exterior tanks, 1.5 million gallons each, 4 of them, and the methane is going to break down. The gas is going to power the facility. It's going to power the trucks to go back to the street to pick up more food waste from our partner locations. The compost out of the water, the digestate that comes out of this, that water will be created into compost, clean water, and fertilizer. Now, let me anticipate a question that I keep getting asked, and that is, well, okay, that's terrific. This sounds great, but where are you going to get the waste from? Well, I can assure you that the 3 million people on Long Island generate a sufficient amount of commercial food waste each year to fill this facility 3 times over. That's what our market tells us. We have already, at this point, firmly contracted 2/3 of our in-feed with 2 major generators, one in Queens and the majority of it from a major hauler on Long Island. The other third of the in-feed in this facility, we are reserving some of that should the town of Brookhaven follow through on the conversations that we've already begun with them to start a small, relatively small, food waste diversion program for the residents. I'd love for the residents of Brookhaven or any other surrounding community to also begin to see the value of doing this. And the rest of the material will come from the marketplace. There are many carters who have expressed an interest in coming into the facility and also understand, once again, getting back to the history of my brother and I, we are fully prepared to haul material ourselves. We have the trucks today, we have the personnel today, we have the expertise today. We're absolutely confident that we will get 100% of this facility filled up, making gas, not making pollutants. It was an industry evolution. it came by a lot of companies and groups coming together, including our local utilities, venture engineering, Scott's Miracle Grow, Green Arrow Engineering, who are probably the best engineers in the country, very experienced building multiple plants such as this, although none on this scale, and the waste generators themselves, and the existing haulers. We're very excited about this. We can't wait for the end of next year when we go live with this. And we're embarking on an exciting program, a program that we feel is a game changer, particularly for the region. And I want to thank Michael and the Liblit Scholarship Committee for having this opportunity to address this group and to tell you a little bit about us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. I just want to let everybody know that if you have a question for Charles, try to send it to us on the chat function, and we'll take those questions to Charles at the end of our next speaker's presentation, and we'll have questions for both sides. So feel free to type those questions out, send them up while we're going here. And we will, you know, I think there's going to be, I've got a couple in already, so there'll be a few questions for Charles. But our next speaker will come at the question, problem of organics from a different perspective. Our speaker is Robert Lang, and Bob is a 1988 graduate of Stony Brook University with a BA in philosophy and religious studies, an MA in linguistics, and an MS in public policy. He's a natural born garbage man, as you can tell. Robert had began his government career in the newly formed Recycling Program and Planning Division of the New York City Department of Sanitation. He served as a community coordinator when recycling was a voluntary community activity being conducted in a small portion of Manhattan's West Village. In 1989, recycling became mandatory for all residents and businesses with the passage of local law number 19 in New York City. And in 1991, Mr. Lang was promoted to the position of Deputy Director in the Bureau of Waste Prevention, Reuse, and Recycling. And he was made director of that section in 1994. He served in that capacity from 1994 through 2014, when he became the director of the Office of Beneficial Reuse Planning, Infrastructure Development, and Management within the Bureau of Solid Waste Management at the Department of Sanitation. Bob retired from the Department of Sanitation in the city in 2016 and accepted a position as the executive director of the Solid Waste Management Authority of the town of North Hempstead on Long Island. And in November of 2019, Mr. Lang retired again, but not, at least for the moment anyway. But he remains very well connected within the world of solid waste, and is got some very interesting insights on the collection of organics and the implementation of programs of that kind. So I will now turn it over to Bob Lang. How are you, Bob?
1 second.
There we go.
Can you see?
I can see you.
Can you see my presentation?
We cannot see your presentation yet. So you need to hit the share screen button on the bottom of the Zoom call. And then you'll need to pick which screen. Usually I do top left, which says something like desktop or screen. And then share, okay.
What do I hit now?
What do you see in front of you?
Okay. Okay, I see.
Perfect.
There we go.
Okay, first let me give a quick shout out to Charles, because over the 30 years I spent with, almost 30 years with sanitation, I met with many entrepreneurs, but people who could better be categorized as potential alchemists around organics waste. Charles, unlike most of those, has a real experience with dealing with food waste and other organics. And he's built that experience of decades into the front end of his facility, because he knows that much of what he'll receive from the public and from institutions and commercial establishments will be essentially indistinguishable from garbage. I need to start the discussion by first subdividing organics into yard waste and food waste, since the challenges of each are quite different, and when combined in a collection program, they also present a third set of very unique challenges. In this discussion, I'll focus primarily upon food waste. This slide shows the 3 codependent variables involved in any attempt to capture food waste. A generator, think participant, could be a resident, a household, a maintenance worker, a business employee, or a business manager all play a key role in the success or failure of any attempt to recover food waste from the refuse stream through source separation. I would argue that the generator is the most critical factor in the success or failure of a food waste separation program, yet the factor most ignored by those individuals and organizations advocating for the implementation of food waste collection programs. Without the full participation by the generator of food waste, no program can be successful. However, most, if not all, programs are instituted as voluntary programs. In other words, food waste collection programs are typically implemented without any compelling means by which to drive participation or any means by which to hold participants accountable for less than desirable participation. To date, food waste source separation programs, as well as other recycling programs that have been implemented, rely instead entirely upon public education as the sole means of motivating participation. Regardless of whether food waste programs are evaluated on an economic or environmental criteria, collection cannot be maintained without sustained and reliable participation on the part of the generator. This is a simple operational economic imperative, where program funds are not unlimited and where many programs compete for the same funds. Typical food waste scraps equal anywhere from 20 to 30% of the average household's waste stream, or even greater for certain food-based businesses. For a food waste collection program to be economically viable, participants must set out close to the entire percentage of what food waste comprised of their weekly refuse waste stream prior to the implementation of a collection program for source-separated food waste. What are some of the main challenges to participation in a source separation food waste collection program? Perhaps the greatest challenge is that participants have a different relationship to food waste than they do to other post-consumer recyclables. Unlike other recyclables that can be conceived of as clean recyclables, though many Longislanders appear not to be aware of the need to empty and rinse bottles and cans, food waste is putrescible waste. Putrescible waste is tangibly no different in nature to the average member of the public than rotting garbage. Items residents and businesses are strongly motivated to remove from their premises quickly, both constitutionally and in compliance with local health codes. The decomposing nature of organic matter is also a reminder of our own limited shelf life as a living organism and the fate that awaits us all at the end. Therefore, people typically have a visceral revulsion to rotting organic matter. To overcome this revulsion, any source separation program designed to collect food waste must address how the food waste will be collected in the home or business in a manner that does not run afoul of people's natural revulsion to food waste storage and allows them the same convenience they associate with setting out of garbage. Unfortunately, most of the remedies for addressing this natural revulsion and need for convenience, like the use of plastic bags, be they degradable or non-degradable plastic bags, to encapsulate the organics and limit the handler's exposure, cause problems for maintaining the quality of the material collected, and present significant challenges for the processor to separate the organics from the non-organics and thereby produce a marketable product for sale. Some food waste programs, such as New York City's latest attempts, have started out by requiring the participants to set out organics loose in city-supplied vermin-proof containers. to preserve the food waste free of contaminants, requiring the participant to periodically rinse and clean the set-out container to prevent odors and possibly attract vermin. Anyone familiar with the housing stock of New York City can easily see why this could present some insurmountable challenges for participants. If it is a challenge to get participants to empty and rinse bottles and cans prior to set-out, it is easy to see how much heavier a lift participants might perceive the need to keep their set-out container clean. Analogous to this challenge is the current lack of compliance in the midst of a pandemic to wear a mask. Most food waste collection programs that start out this way quickly transition, resulting from participant feedback in the form of poor compliance, to allowing plastic bags for organic set-out in the containers to aid in boosting lagging participation. Even though controlling contamination is critically important to a successful food waste program, again, let me emphasize that more important is full and robust participation by all participants. Infrastructure investment can, to a degree, mitigate contamination, but compelling participants to fully participate is a far greater challenge. Food waste and the collector. The role of the collector is frequently overemphasized with regard to the success or failure of an organics recovery program, especially true when the collector is the government or service provider hired by the government. Government services being far more subject to political forces than those supplied by the private sector. Legislators, and to a lesser extent, the executive branches of government, frequently suffer from what could be pejoratively described as the field of dreams approach to problem solving. In other words, their expectation is that if you legislate, the public will immediately comply with the dictates of the new legislation, when in fact the gulf between when a law is enacted and when compliance on the part of the public is fully engaged may be decades, if ever. Certain areas on Long Island effectively illustrating this point, where 30 years after the passage of mandatory recycling legislation at the state and local level, certain self-governing communities, otherwise known as incorporated villages, still do not have access to recycling services. Public versus private. The private sector as collector has perhaps a little more leverage with its customer base, at least where market forces are allowed to determine service costs. And the services are not solely determined by the government regulators. I believe some areas of Suffolk still operate in this manner where the customer directly engages collection services. Government-operated collection programs are influenced primarily by political rather than economic forces. For obvious reasons, this provides the private service supplier with potentially more leverage over its customer base to influence compliance. And I think Charles can speak to that. While the government, in contrast, and in the absence of tangible enforcement, has again only public education to rely upon. In fact, the last quarter century of government-operated recycling programs in America can be seen as a vast experiment in social engineering to evaluate the power of public education alone to influence and motivate a particular behavior within the anonymous confines of individual households and businesses. To determine the success of this approach, you need only walk your neighborhood on recycling collection day. Efficiency and quality of collection. The major priorities of the operators of collection programs are maintaining efficiency, tons per truck, and not compromising through the collection process the quality of what is set out by participants. It should be noted that the economic model which currently defines the efficiency of any recycling collection program comes from the time when everything was collected together as refuse, when efficiency was defined as clearing the streets and loading out a truck. The future recycling of any item or group of items formally defined as part of the collective refuse stream via separate collection will, by this model, inherently lack efficiency, especially if utilizing the same collection vehicles and staffing, simply because targeting ever smaller portions of the refuse stream using the same collection system requires the collection of many more stops and longer routes. However, in the absence of needed data regarding future program participants' frequency of set out and the quality of what may be set out, the collector will use whatever collection vehicles and staffing is already available. This may change over time, but any future change is directly linked to feedback regarding participant set out and frequency and quality, since the capital investment in new equipment can only be justified by sufficient volume and preserving the quality of what is set out. In addition to the possible use of new collection equipment, there will be changes that need to be negotiated either with private service providers contracts or with municipal unionized workforce to accommodate the new collection program's vehicles and schedule. Food waste and the processor. At the present time, the infrastructure for processing food waste is both conceptually and practically at the same stage traditional bottle and can recyclables were at when many programs were still in their infancy 30+ years ago. A circumstance wherein the potential processor has little knowledge with regard to what might be set out by the public and in what condition. What impact the collection process might have upon what is collected, what volumes to expect with what frequency, what it will cost to process the material collected, and finally, what the processed material's market value, if any, might be at the end of the process. Such open-ended questions regarding food waste volumes, weekly set-out frequency by participants, initial set-out quality, and market opportunities also present challenges for infrastructure investment. Simply put, what is needed to accept and handle what is received from the food waste collection program and create from that raw input a viable end product at a reasonable cost. The fundamental question is who will pay for the investment needed to ensure the infrastructure will be in place to accommodate what results from food waste set out and collection legislation. A related question is what should come first, the infrastructure to accept food waste or the collection to produce the feedstock needed by that infrastructure? While government frequently passes laws that require the source separation, collection, and processing of material types, including food waste, it rarely aids in the investment needed to ensure that the needed infrastructure is there to do something with what is collected, relying instead on the private sector to provide the needed acceptance infrastructure. But without substantial economic development support through grants, low interest financing, or put or pay contractual arrangements, the private sector is usually unwilling to make the needed investment. This reluctance is understandable given the financial risks involved, particularly given the likelihood that government will abandon support for collection programs in response to any number of factors such as poor participation resulting in high collection costs or diminishing tax revenues to support ongoing collections, a situation manifesting itself right now as I speak in New York City, both from poor participation and the pandemic's impact upon the city's budget. The major challenges which I previously described as associated with the generator's behavior and the collection methodologies used all also impact directly processing. Again, similar to the challenges presented by food waste to collectors, volume and contamination are the two major challenges for the processor as well. Processors require sufficient volumes to justify operations and a food waste input material clean enough to make a viable product from. Processing source separated food waste is particularly challenging when collection has occurred prior to proper infrastructure development, in which case the burden of processing food waste from pilot programs usually falls upon whatever yard waste processing facility is available locally, or within a reasonable distance from the point of route completion. The distance from the end of a collection route to the dump location being a major cost factor in the operation of any collection program. Yard waste facilities that are unprepared operationally and from a regulatory standpoint to accept and process food waste. Waste defined from a regulatory standpoint as essentially putrescible waste, and particularly food waste that is demonstrably contaminated upon arrival with non-organic items. Typically, what arrives is not pure organic food waste, but food waste commingled with lots of contaminants from plastic bags, both non-degradable and degradable, other non-organic recyclables, and essentially anything that can make its way into a food waste bin prior to collection. This is what many people envision when they think of what food waste will look like. This is more what it's going to look like. If the processing site is a yard waste facility receiving this type of commingled mix of food waste and assorted contaminants, the mix presents a number of problems. Primarily adjusting to the acceptance of food waste will require the facility to secure a different type of operating permit, whether on a pilot basis or permanently, a permit which will require additional investment and changes in operations, assuming the facility has space to accommodate the additional requirements, as well as the financial resources for the investment in additional staff. Here's an example of what food waste looks like at a drop-off program, a manned drop-off program where you have somebody overseeing the bin where people are dropping off the food waste. As you can see, it's radically different from what you receive curbside. Here's an example of manual separation of food waste. This is material that came from the Yale's commissary. Obviously, these are not terribly desirable jobs, going waste through the food waste. However, recently some equipment manufacturers have developed equipment that's fairly reliable in separating waste organics, wet organics from dry or bulky non-organics. Some of these same mechanisms, I believe, are going to be in Charles' facility. Equipment that is useful if the targeted material is pure food waste. If not, much of what enters the process winds up in the residue pile, thereby somewhat invalidating the capture success of the program, meaning a lot of food waste clings to the packaging, so you lose it in the process. Unfortunately, this same equipment is not capable of separating out successfully yard waste. Here's a couple of examples of what institutional waste in the city look like coming from its organics program. As I said, unfortunately, this same equipment is not capable of separating out successfully yard waste. Think dry waste from wet organics. So either yard waste, whether it has been combined with food waste to maximize tons per truck shift, has to be hand sorted out prior to final processing to capture it, or alternatively sacrificed as residue. Each of these challenges adds to the cost of processing the incoming organics and reduces the actual final amount of food waste successfully diverted from the waste stream. Once decontaminated, the remaining food waste can potentially be composted in windrows with sufficient bulking agents supplied or in an AD process. Here's a couple more examples. This is the yard waste facility at Freshkills receiving curbside organics along with yard waste, and then it has to be hand sorted by the individuals there. So in addition to the generic challenges I've just described, there are some particular challenges presented by Long Island, which I'd like to describe. Challenges that may vary in impact depending upon the individual county in which you happen to reside. And these are a fragmented governmental structure leading to widespread redundancy, county, town, incorporated villages, and special districts, very little cooperation between individual jurisdiction units. The state has been quite challenged with doing solid waste management plans because of this. Numerous self-governing fiefdoms, no regional planning other than as an academic exercise, short-term election cycle leading to limited tolerance for change or innovation on the part of elected officials and their staff. Greater turnover of staffing leads to lack of planning and policy continuity. An historical intimacy between the elected officials and the island's dominant union developed over more than half a century that established both political and financial ties between the two. Currently, little to no accountability regarding recycling activities, either for the individual governmental jurisdiction or individual collection program participant. Some self-governing areas having never implemented recycling requirements over the last 30 years, essentially recycling-free zones. Particularly in the more affluent areas of the island, high taxes and an emphasis upon maximum collection service at lowest cost. Trash and recycling service costs generally are very low, but a fact little understood by the average taxpayer, who only looks at their annual property tax bill. In many areas, residents pay less for an annual collection service than they pay for a few months of their cable or cell phone bill. Collection frequency disproportionately high given the housing stock and housing density. Some areas dominated by single-family homes receiving at least 3 refuse collections per week, and some as many as 5 or 6, believe it or not. a higher frequency than that which is received in the highest density areas in New York City, a trash frequency level which encourages disposal and discourages recycling. White glove service in many areas, including side door collection service for trash, but curbside set out for recycling, further encouraging residents to just throw everything out just outside their back door. A limited pool of private service providers willing to meet the collection services as solicited, which demand maximum service at minimal cost per household. To meet the maximum service at lowest cost requested, certain compromises are made at the point of service, such as separate collection of source-separated recyclables. In other words, recyclables are combined with garbage to clear the streets and keep the populace happy. Compromises which are known and readily tolerated by local elected officials to avoid changes in service provision, which might possibly result in higher bids and therefore higher tax assessments to cover those additional costs, partially attributable to the tyranny of the 2% tax cap. Very little voter or public participation in governmental processes other than during major election time. Villages and special districts scheduling elections at inconvenient times to minimize voter turnout and therefore public input. For those interested in a more humorous take on some of the challenges presented by Long Island's unique governmental structure, I'd recommend the following. And that's the end.
Thank you, Bob. I'd recommend that one too, if you're a fan of special districts. And now I think we can take some questions. I have one that I'd like to present to Charles. And Charles, this is the one that the other one you probably get all the time. And, you know, I know you've had overcome an innumerable number of obstacles to get to the point where you are with the project. But when do you think you may be in a position to break ground? And when do you think you might be able to accept your first truckload of organic material?
We have every confidence we'll be breaking ground before the end of the year, this year, and we'll be taking in material by the very end of 2021.
Okay, all right. Congratulations. That's gonna be a big day, and we're all looking forward to that. I have some questions from folks, and one question came asking if your facility has any rail access. I don't believe you do. Is that correct? Or
no, we don't.
Okay. What then do you have an estimate of the percentage of incoming material that's going to end up as a residue at the end of the process, and where would that go if you got it?
We are contracting for no more than 10% contamination. A lot of the photos that Robert showed, let's just talk about the food waste photos, not any of the commingled with yard waste. But a lot of the food waste photos that were shown, about contamination. Contamination is very interesting. When I say 10% contamination, it's 10% by weight. And you have to think about what that contamination will wind up looking like. Plastic doesn't weigh a lot. So you could have a 2-ton container, and all of it, all of the material is in plastic bags. When you purge the bags open, you remove the bags. The bags are a de minimis amount of that weight. And we believe that 10% is easily obtainable. The state law mandating that the commercial food waste establishment segregate its food waste almost doesn't allow for any contamination, but real life is such that there will be. And, there will be all the things that I spoke about, the busted up can, the jar, the broken plate and the cutlery, you know, but anybody who has ever actually moved those containers or lifted those cans from a restaurant or a fruit store or a fish store knows the weight that is, and it's all the food waste. It's all the wet waste.
And you'll end up with a soil product at the end, as well as the natural gas, the methane you'll be generating, right?
Right.
So, of that in that soil product, will there be a follow-up screening after the digestion has taken place?
Well, actually, the screening occurs in multiple stages of the entire process. There's the initial screening, where there's the gross separation of the digestibles from the non-digestibles. And remember, I'm not sure if people heard it well. We create a slurry out of the food waste, meaning we add water to it, creating a very liquid slurry. Post slurry creation, but prior to digestion, all this liquid goes into a settling tank. And two things happen in this settling tank. Number one, the light plastic floats to the surface. And the heavies, that which got through the 1/8-inch hole, little broken shards of glass, little pebbles, stones, etc., all settle to the bottom of this tank. And the plastic is skimmed off continuously, and the heavies, the grit in the industry, is pulled out of the bottom of it. So that's, part of that. Post digestion, the material comes in and it's quote dewatered, which means the solids are taken out. Prior to that dewatering and the solids coming out, there is also a screening, a very fine mesh screening that things go through. So we're pulling contaminants out then. Now, in the cake that gets produced after the water is removed from the solids, those solids will now be incorporated into Long Island Compost, established compost product, and it's actually a cleaner material than the yard waste we're currently composting. But even that, post-composting, goes through another screening. We're very proud of the quality control that we've been able to establish, the protocols that we've been able to establish, which has helped us be such a successful marketer of end product. And the residual, the material that is screened out, pulled out, separated out, as I said, that which can be recycled will be recycled. The rest will be disposed of through our contract with our existing in-feed supplier. But as I said, that should be no more, maximum 10% of the in-feed material.
Okay. You've been handling a lot of yard waste over the years, and ending up with soil amendment products. The one question we have is, is your market for those finished products mainly Long Island, or do you export off the island? And do you expect to be, doing the same with the product from the digester? In
bulk material, it's mostly It's really all in the New York metropolitan region, with the vast majority of it on Long Island. But we do have reach in Westchester, and our engineered soils are used throughout the boroughs through a multitude of arrangements. Central Park Conservancy, I couldn't begin to list all of the folks over there. But through our joint venture with Scott's Miracle Grow, the reach into the residential market is much greater than just this tight metropolitan area. And to put things into perspective, for quite a while now, we've been successfully marketing over 500,000 cubic yards a year, 500,000 cubic yards a year, every year that we've been in existence. We have never, ever not been able to market our product.
Thank you, Charles. I have a question here for Bob. Bob, have you, in your experience with organics and collection and composting, have you had any occasion have you taken a look around the country? Can you point to a program that appears to be doing it right? Any examples that might be followed that the city of Denver has been suggested by our questioner as a program that seems to have promise? Are you familiar with that one, or any others that you could talk about?
Not totally familiar with that one, but frankly, I haven't seen any that are really successful from an economic standpoint and from an environmental standpoint. They're more successful from a political standpoint.
Okay. Let's see. Here for either of you guys in your positions, have you guys in recent months seen any behavioral changes that you might note as a result of COVID in terms of waste composition, food waste generation, and things that will affect how we manage the waste going forward if we aren't returning to normal anytime soon?
Well, Charles can probably speak to this. Commercial waste has been reduced significantly, but residential waste has gone way up.
Well, that leads me to another question about food waste prevention programs. I'm not 100% sure what the questioner was referring to, but I think the idea is that there may be ways to urge, the public to not generate food waste in as large quantities as they do. Is that something that you're familiar with?
Personally, I think that's a much better way to go. In addition to Charles' facility, and he can speak to this directly, is, I believe, more targeted at primarily commercial, and he's already sourced a lot of his materials. So his facility is really an outlier compared to some of the proposed facilities to deal with residential waste. The residential waste is a lot more challenging to deal with than commercial waste because it's not as homogeneous as commercial waste.
Okay. Well, I guess let's see. Here's a question for Charles, and this is on a regulatory matter. Will the state and federal Title V permit applications apply to your facility in terms of emissions?
We have two permits that directly address this. Besides our Part 360 solid waste permit that all of the carters and transfer station operators are on Long Island are certainly well aware of. We also have an air permit You know, our air emissions have to be monitored. We have maximum limits of NOx, etc., and all of our equipment is certified to operate within acceptable standards.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's come to be to time to close. It's now 12:04. I would invite you, urge you to stay tuned. There'll be another invitation coming out for our next symposium, which will be in 2 weeks, on the subject of the transportation challenges facing solid waste management on Long Island. And I'd like to thank both Charles and Bob for very informative and astute observations on the situation that we face today. And I hope to see you, or you can see me next in 2 weeks. And on behalf of the Liblit Steering Committee and the Liblit Foundation, I thank you all very much, and good day.